If you're listening on the podcast, thank you very much. Make sure you subscribe, give me a good rating if you enjoy the show. But I'm also going to break this up into a couple different parts for the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and hit the notification bell. It really does help. Now, Scream 4 specifically, if you haven't seen it, Sidney Prescott stops in Woodsboro. She's on a PR tour of her motivational book. Ghostface returns to dial up the death and destruction over a decade after the original murders. You have no idea how painful that is to admit that this movie that not only had a decade, let's say decades passed, 15 years or so between Scream and Scream 4, but this movie came out a decade ago. Okay, I feel like Tim Allen in the Santa Claus when he's looking in the mirror and the beard grows in, I'm in big trouble. Like, that's what I feel like right now. I feel like an old man. Scream came out in like 1996 or 97. I was in middle school. And it still feels like yesterday. When I think about the 90s, it still feels like 10 years ago, but it's all in the past now. This is a 30-year-old franchise, and it makes me feel old as balls. One good thing about Scream 4 that I will start with is, as I mentioned in the overall Scream overlay that preceded this, Scream 4 takes the framework of the previous Scream movies and it manipulates the audience with it, right? They take, in the other movies, they always talk about there's successful rules to survive in a horror movie. We all know that by now. Scream 4 smacks you over the face with a baseball bat and says, Psh, don't say I'll be back. Psh, don't trust a love interest. Psh, don't trust this. Like, don't go in there. Don't be alone. Don't split up. Like, they tell you all this stuff right up front. Even if they don't outright say it, they're leading you down this path. And to me, that did a great job of building tension. And some of these movies being more comedic and slapsticky in some ways, I think they really did a good job in this one of moving in a more serious direction and using it to build tension. They did it in Scream 1, but I think it's capitalized on Scream 4 and later Scream 5. But they use these things like the love interest, the film junkie, the jilted lover, and they use them to misdirect you, to cast doubt on people. And it really takes that concept of nobody can be trusted over the top, and it's really done well. We know the familiar beats. They make sure to remind us of them, as I mentioned. They excel at playing with these elements to explore even new avenues. This is a 12-year-old movie, so I'm going to give some minor spoilers here. But instead of locking it into the rigid formula of, okay, here's the main character, here's her love interest, he's probably going to turn on her, they invert these things. Right? You follow the lead of the movie, the new girl who are going to pass the torch. Well, maybe she's going to take the goddamn torch. That's what I'm talking about. And not only that, but while we're watching these things happen, people will say, I'll be right back. Don't split up. And people do these things. It doesn't always pay off. The rules are evolving as the series is evolving. So, one thing I mentioned was that reboots, they often lock themselves into rigid formula, whereas Scream 4, it didn't seem to do that. It used it to its advantage. Another thing they struggle with is how to use legacy characters. We've seen other movies where Sally, was it Harvesty, she comes back for Leatherface. And although it was cool, it seemed a little bit of a knockoff of some other movies we've seen recently. And it also was a bit of a stretch. I mean, there was a big time gap, and she just came back out of nowhere and was blowing Leatherface away. It was like, all right, she's nowhere to be found. Where is she? Where is she? Now she's there and she comes back. It was a little bit ham-fisted. It wasn't very subtle. And we've seen this with other franchises. Like Star Wars is a huge one. They just started right out with the new generation, and then there was legacy characters, and they did some work to connect them. But like The Last Jedi, a lot of people like it. I think it missed the mark with connecting Luke and Rey. It just never seemed organic. And they took chances with characters, but completely removed them from the nature of the character in the first place. Like Rian Johnson's Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill has said himself, This is not my Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker would never do this type of stuff. So I think it's a struggle because, to be fair, these are 40, 50-year-old franchises. So if you're going to do something different, like there was a cut ending of Laurie Strode turning evil and attacking her granddaughter. I don't know if it was cut from the film or cut from the screenplay and changed. That would have been a big chance to take with that character. Unfortunately, they felt, hey, she needs a cathartic final act and she needs redemption and to move on with her life and put it behind her. I can't say I disagree with that. But again, it's locking it into familiar tropes and familiar beats. And we've seen this so many times. With Scream 4 and even Scream 5, they were able to bring back these legacy characters. And I guess the biggest thing was they gave them purpose. They didn't just like Halloween kills and Halloween ends. You have the survivors group at the bar, and then like 3 of them are dispatched in the first 20 minutes. They're there for being cannon fodder. There's not a lot to them. They were just member berries and, hey, remember the nurse in Halloween 2? Like, yeah, okay, well, there she is, and she survived, and she's still alive, but now she's gone. It just, there was not a huge purpose to a lot of these characters. And even Tommy's character in Halloween Kills, he had a purpose, but like I never got behind the character. It was like, all right, he's here, let's go. He's here, let's go. Like there was never like any emotional depth to him. It was just he's this big jacked like trauma guy, and he's gonna go kill Michael Myers, and he leads the posse. There was never any character work with it. That being said, one thing I liked about is bringing the legacy characters for Scream back, building on their past histories, and then juxtaposing them with new characters to give them interactions and to give them purpose and to build these connections and, in some cases, tensions with them. One great example in Scream 4 is you have Officer Dewey, who's now the sheriff. Gale Weathers is his wife. And then now you have Deputy Judy, who works for Dewey, and she's obviously got a crush on him and seems a little obsessed. And I honestly thought that she was going to be one of the killers when they revealed it at the end of the movie, just because they'd planted that so firmly with Gale and with Dewey and this tension thing. Alas, it was not to be. Again, manipulating expectations. Gale and Sydney's publicist. When Sydney shows up, she has a publicist who's kind of bloodthirsty. Gale comes back and puts her in her place, and she even, it's kind of ham-fisted, but when she curses this girl out, she turns around and says, still got it. Because here she's been like this writer's block. She's done all these books, and the movies were based on the stories, everything that she wrote. But in this case, she's had a much more mundane existence and hasn't had to have the teeth out and the claws out as this investigative reporter that she had years back. And now, all right, I'm comfortable. I've still got it. I can still do this. Another thing is Sydney. Sydney comes back. She feels guilty about people being attacked because ultimately she's involved in some way. She's the final girl. She's the original one that was attacked by Ghostface to begin with. This is all kind of, she feels maybe, her fault. Her cousin is attacked, Jill. And I think it's Jill. Yeah, Jill. And she's the new Sydney, blah, 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 right? And that was another thing, too, is with the legacy characters and mixing them together. It wasn't so ham-fisted and cardboard and wooden and deliberate like Halloween 2018. Oh, so you're the new Loomis? It's like, ugh. Yes, they took a chance and did something different with him after that. But again, the way this was done to just let the story play out, let the characters dovetail into one another. There was even an issue with Sydney and Jill kind of connected over their both being survivors of attacks. But Jill's mom, who was Sydney's aunt, seemed like she had a grudge. And I wasn't convinced that she didn't maybe have something to do with this, although she was a little bit older at the time. I think when you compare how reboots tend to use legacy characters, I think you're working with a delicate balance because they're legacy films. They have franchise cred behind them. Now, how do you bridge that gap with the next generation? Scream 4 and eventually Scream 5, which I'll discuss, did a great job of that because they folded all these, almost like a recipe. It was like when you heat up cream cheese, and then you mix up batter for crepe, and then you just fold everything in together. It just becomes a whole new thing. That's what happened with these films. So to me, it was a more seamless, a more subtle, a more useful and purposeful melding of past and future that other legacy reboots just haven't been able to capitalize on. I think it was done really well here. Introducing new families, speaking of new characters, is often used as like a deus ex machina in horror movies, especially later sequels. Usually when we see family brought into play, Halloween 4 comes into mind, Freddy's Dead, Jason Goes to Hell. You see a rift where you've seen like a successful franchise, they have a star, they have a recognizable face and a celebrity, and then for some reason that celebrity's not available. And the success of the franchise kind of hinges on some familiarity. So what they'll do is oftentimes they'll take, oh, hey, here's her cousin and plug her in. Or, hey, here's Freddy's long-lost daughter that no one ever knew about. Pop her in here. And there's no cohesion. It's random. It's abrupt. And it doesn't have a connection with the legacy of the heroes or the people they're replacing. Because in a lot of cases, they're just casting to type. They're trying to find someone to fill that role, someone who looks like that person, someone who resembles that person in demeanor or whatever boxes they're trying to check. This film was able to do this without, to me, at least in my opinion, this is how I feel. I'm not talking to other people about this right now. It's a 12-year-old movie. But I felt like they were able to do it without drawing comparisons to the original. Like, I didn't ever look at Jill and go, she's no Neve Campbell, right? I didn't look at Judy and go, she's no Dewey. I think it felt more organic and less abrupt. And it wasn't like they were just replacing these characters. The legacy characters continued on and worked alongside these characters in some ways. And I think it also gave the potential for more suspects. I think it's a big one too. Because not only did you not just replace characters, not only did you not just deus ex machina, a new development to carry things on or to stretch it out, but you had these people working together. Again, purpose. It was purposeful. It was well written. The characters worked together or against each other in some cases. But it gives more motive for potential killers as well. Not just more opportunity for another body to be holding a knife. But again, you had the family issues. You have jilted lovers. You have the old publicist, the new publicist, or however you want to word that. There was tension. There was conflict naturally between the characters, but then legacy characters also moved alongside. And the legacy characters didn't stop their development. They developed along the way as well. You saw that they had grown from the last installment, but they continued to develop and continued to evolve alongside the new kids. So, as far as motives are concerned, you had a number of them. One thing I thought of was, is Sydney out for blood? She's doing this motivational tour, or motivational tour, to quote Mickey from Rocky. She's out doing this tour. She's telling her story. She's been living with this for 15 years. She's had issues, and she's putting on a game face. But she shows up in town right as this shit starts happening, and it happens to her family. You have a normal life. Why can't I? Right? This is going to happen to you too. I'm going to continue this. I was thinking that was a possibility. Maybe she's out for blood. Even with the Gail Weathers thing, turning her life story into books and 7 films and all this stuff that they talk about in the movie. Or did she have survivor's guilt? Like, look at all these people who have died, and it's my fault, and blah, blah. You don't know after 15 years what's happening. We haven't seen them since Scream 3, right? Does her surviving family hold a grudge? I remember I mentioned, I should say, her aunt. How dare you come back here? Look what you've done to this town, and you're going to come back and try to hawk your wares. She even makes a point in the movie and says, I think Kirby says, like, I wonder how many scars she has. And the mom says, no one ever asks me about my scars. There's definitely some friction there. Is there a new Woodsboro High killer? Is one of these new kids a killer? There's a big cast in addition to the legacy characters. Did Gail Weathers finally wait to write the next chapter of the book? In the beginning of the film, she had writer's block. All this stuff starts happening. She can't find the next chapter in the series because she's not working off of past events. Is this a way to write her own story? And we'll get to that more in a minute. I mentioned Judy. Does she want Dewey all to herself? Does she want to be the hero? Does she want to come in guns blazing and make everyone look like she's the hero of this thing? You know, true to Scream legend, nobody is above suspicion. But they also, as I mentioned, did it in a very seamless way, I think. It really worked. I was expecting nothing from these movies, and I was really impressed with the way they were able to do this. I mentioned before, they were able to take older tropes that haven't worked and use them to their benefit. The live streaming and vlogging aspect added a lot to this. It just was something different other than just following the killer point of view. They did some things with the live streaming, the cameras, at the party, at the Scream, the Stabathon party in the barn. So I think it takes the source material in different avenues. We didn't have that in the original Scream. It's voyeuristic, which plays into some of the classic entries in the genre. And again, like Dangertainment didn't work for Michael Myers. It didn't work. It was a novel concept. It was a good college try. But it worked in this case because they were able to work it in. And it made sense with, hey, is it these movie buffs? Are they trying to make their own movie? Excuse me. Watch the film and see for yourself. So, I think with this movie, the finale is a bit over the top. But the theme is clear. I'm not going to spoil everything, but I will say this movie ties into current society and about the high price of fame. I mean, look at who our most famous people are. It's usually people doing outrageous things to get attention, and then they parlay that into some sort of riches or success or book deal or podcast or YouTube show, or now it's TikTok, right? So dovetailing with this new sense of debauchery equals cash, from sex tapes. I didn't even mention sex tapes, or Logan Paul. I think it's Logan or Jake Paul at the Suicide Forest, bad reality shows. It just shows the terrible things people will do to be famous. And I'll let you watch the movie if you haven't seen it and see what I mean, because it's a great, I probably spoiled too much already, but again, taking all of these setups, all of these premises, taking all of this framework and the rules we know that you have to live by to survive a horror movie, and flipping it around. Because fame, you got to pay a heavy price for it. And some people are willing to pay more than others. Living in the limelight, the universal dream for those who wish to seem. It's always a great night when I can work a Rush lyric into a video. So again, Scream 4. Is it perfect? Nah, not perfect. Is it one of the better entries into the genre in a while? Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I think I enjoyed it more than Halloween 2018. Part of that is because of expectations being low. But to me, it made me a fan of the genre. I'm not going to go back and watch 2 and 3, but it hooked me in, and it led me into Scream 5. I'm out of time. My name's bshowbrian. Thank you for checking out the channel. Like, subscribe. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time.